Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Jenna Schaefer, psychotherapist here. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the similarities and differences between someone that has obsessive compulsive personality disorder and someone who's a narcissist. This video actually was a request from my subscribers that wanted to understand how these things are alike and how they can be different. And I really do think this is a good topic because while doing research for this video, there actually isn't a lot of information out there comparing OCPD to NPD. And as a therapist, I've seen both these presentations myself that have come into my office. So some of this is going to be based off my personal experiences with seeing both of these different personality types. There are some definite ways that there are similar shared traits between these two types of personalities, but there's also a lot of differences as well, but they can kind of be hard to spot sometimes. I also want to make the distinction that in this video, I am talking about OCPD, Obsessive Compulsive Personality Disorder, and not OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. And they're actually two very, very different presentations. OCD is a hallmark anxiety disorder. OCPD is a personality disorder. OCD is characterized by intrusive thoughts that are ego-dystonic in nature, meaning that they don't align with someone's values and personality. And in response to these thoughts, individuals perform compulsive behaviors in order to minimize the distress caused by these thoughts. Now, someone with OCPD is compulsive as well. However, it is not done to necessarily nullify any particular thoughts that they're having or feelings that they're having, right? OCPD is more hallmarked by ego-syntonic thoughts, meaning that it aligns with someone's personality, which means it's a personality disorder. So I realize that maybe not everyone is familiar with OCPD as they are with NPD. So I am just going to briefly go through the DSM's criteria for someone that has OCPD. I do have a video that goes over the criteria for NPD, and I'll make sure that I link that video down below if you want to check that out too. So for a diagnosis of obsessive compulsive personality disorder, a person must have a persistent pattern or preoccupation with order, perfectionism, control of self, others, and situations. And then this pattern is shown by the presence of at least 4 of the following: a preoccupation with details, rules, schedules, organization, and lists, striving to do something perfectly that interferes with completion of a task, excessive devotion to work and productivity, not due to financial necessity, and this results in the negligence of leisure activities and friends, excessive conscientiousness, and inflexibility regarding ethical and moral issues and values, unwillingness to throw out worn or worthless objects, even those with no sentimental value, reluctance to delegate or work with other people unless those people agree to do things exactly as the person wants, a preoccupation and obsession with saving money, and rigidity and stubbornness. And again, a person must have at least 4 of those traits on a regular, consistent basis to be given a diagnosis of OCPD. So if you're watching this and you're familiar with NPD, you may have noticed that there is some overlap there. There are definitely some symptoms of OCPD that could most definitely show up in NPD. So let's take a little bit of a deeper dive and kind of see where NPD and OCPD have some overlap and also how they can also be a little bit different to help you differentiate between both. This list is not intended to be all-inclusive or even perfect. People are all different. Both of NPD and OCPD are on a continuum or spectrum. This is just generalized information and also based on my own experiences between seeing both of these different personality types show up in my office. One of the biggest common traits that narcissists and people with OCPD share is perfectionism. OCPD is very, very rooted in this idea of the need to be perfect, and narcissists is kind of the same thing. I think the biggest difference between the perfectionism that shows up in someone with OCPD is that if something isn't perfect, they're more likely to take it out on themselves. And perfectionism is something they're always striving for too. They don't internally really believe that things are perfect. They're very, very self-critical. They're constantly working towards this idea of perfectionism, where someone who is narcissistic already believes that they are perfect. The perfectionism that we see with narcissists is directly fueled by their grandiosity. People with OCPD don't really have as much grandiosity. That's more of a hallmark of narcissism. Narcissists believe that they're perfect just because they're unique and special, meaning that they're not striving as much for perfectionism as believing that they're already there. And they need this perfectionism to be validated for them, so they require external sources of supply so other people to validate that they are indeed perfect. In my experience, I don't notice that need as much with people that have OCPD, needing other people to kind of give them a lot of reassurance that they are as perfect as, they want to be. Now, I'm not saying that they don't want approval from other people or don't like approval from other people. However, I don't view it as it being as much of a necessity as it is for someone with narcissism. Both people who are narcissistic and people with OCPD can be rigid and controlling people. They both have the potential to abuse others, including their romantic partners, friends, coworkers, family members. They are both black and white thinking. They both struggle to see shades of gray in various situations. Things are typically all good or all bad, so they both engage in a lot of what we clinically call splitting. So some differences with the rigidity. With OCPD people, I've noticed this rigidity kind of applies to a lot of like societal rules and expectations on how they believe things should go or how they've been told they should go. Narcissists, however rigid, yes, tend to feel that they can override a lot of those rules, that the rules don't necessarily apply to them because, again, they're special, unique, entitled people. The control part, people with OCPD can be very controlling over others, people that are close to them, their colleagues at work, coworkers. Usually it's in order to meet the means to an end of something that they're trying to accomplish. Narcissists, they like control because they kind of thrive off having power and control over other people. That is a source of supply to them. So while these behaviors can look similar, kind of their origins and also the goals of rigidity and control tend to be different. Both narcissists and people with OCPD can lack a lot of generosity, and they also both can profoundly struggle with empathy. People with OCPD really have a hard time understanding why somebody wouldn't want to do things their way. They have a hard time taking the perspective of somebody else or seeing a potential flaw in a plan that they have or a goal that they're trying to achieve or how they're trying to achieve a goal. Like, for example, if I say the best way to get to downtown Milwaukee, which is where I live, is to take I-94 straight through. Someone with OCPD might say, yeah, that's ridiculous. No, taking this route and this route is a way better way to go. And no amount of evidence is going to shift their mind. They're going to probably think ill of me that I'm stupid for thinking that. They can't see why I might think that that's an easier way to go, that it's different than that. It's a small example and not of value, but it can also be applied in much larger situations and these can be like really hard people to work with. Narcissists, as I'm sure many of us are aware, one of the hallmark features of narcissism is lacking empathy. And they're also typically don't tend to be very generous people either. They have a very hard time feeling the feelings of other people, putting themselves in other people's shoes and understanding why they might come off a certain way to somebody. So they really struggle with awareness, which, is related to their lack of empathy. Narcissists struggle to understand the feelings of other people. They struggle to understand how they come off to other people, and so do people with OCPD. One of the biggest things I've noticed with OCPD is that usually when they come to therapy, a lot of times it's like their significant other, people they're close to, are kind of pushing them into therapy. Now, this can also be true with narcissists as well. It's the people around them that really struggle with the traits of OCPD, right? And the person with OCPD doesn't usually see an issue. And this is one of the ways that I do a differential diagnosis between OCD and OCPD. OCD is very bothersome to someone that has it. Someone with OCPD, it's not the case. It typically works for them. It's working for them. A lot of times these people are very successful. They've done very well as a result of their workaholic, perfectionistic ways. And that's another similarity too. Narcissists as well. They have a really hard time seeing how they're impacting others. They have a lot of times the traits are working for them, right? They're working for them. They're doing well. They also tend to do very well in their careers, so they get a lot of positive reinforcement. This is especially true for more of the grandiose or exhibitionist types of narcissists. They can be very, very driven, so they don't see an issue with their traits, right? They're working for them. This is true even with narcissists that have more insight into their behaviors. Why change anything? It's working for me. It's the people around them that tend to have a hard time and suffer. Both people with OCPD and NPD can also be very angry people. With OCPD, it can be directed towards others, but it can also, a lot of times, also directed towards themselves. Again, they're very self-critical people. When they make a mistake of something or something that they perceive as being a mistake, they do a lot of negative self-talk towards themselves and get very angry and mad at themselves. A narcissist, yes, they get angry and they rage at other people, and other kind of classic behavior of narcissists, especially when they get injured. They're more likely to be angry at external circumstances. They have a very much externalized locus of control, right? Things happen to them, not through them. And when things don't go their way, they get angry at the thing that's not going the way, or the person that's causing the thing to not go their way. They're most likely not going to as often look inside internally and be like, okay, how did I contribute to this not working out the way that I wanted to? Because that takes accountability, which is something that narcissists lack. People with OCPD don't lack as much of accountability. If something doesn't work, they can take more accountability. But again, it's not really a healthy form of accountability. It's more of a self-deprecating type of accountability or criticism, self-criticism. Both narcissists and people with OCD tend to struggle with self-esteem. In my experience, I have not seen either a narcissist or someone with OCPD that did not have a pretty significant trauma background, or parents that had traits of either of those things, or maybe parents that struggled with substance use, things like alcoholism and drugs. A lot of times with personality disorders in general, these traits are kind of the result of needing to cope with a rather stressful and traumatic or invalidating environment. And with complex trauma, a common symptom amongst many survivors of complex trauma, no matter how it displays itself later in life, is a low self-esteem. And the self-esteem characteristic can really depend on the type of narcissist too. There's research that supports that more grandiose, exhibitionist narcissists do score higher on self-esteem measures. Now, whether that's like deeply accurate or their falsified self is just so dense that you can't tap into any true self, I think is open to interpretation. But regardless, internal validation for all narcissists is really hard. They need to have externalized sources of supply in order to really be functional. People with high self-esteem don't generally need other people to constantly give them validation. So they both overcompensate for having a lower self-esteem by, in general, OCPD working really hard, right? Being this level of perfect that they think that they need to be, and really, really overly focusing on that need to be perfect. Narcissists, they will project a lot of their insecurities onto other people because they are unable to regulate those insecurities or process through them on their own. It's not me that has the problem, it's you that has the problem. If you've dealt with a narcissist, you probably know what I'm talking about. Narcissists will overcompensate with things like needing to be the smartest and most brilliant person or the most beautiful person in the room at all times. OCPD people are just more likely just to try to do very, very well at maybe their job or sometimes maybe like a sport or activity. I don't see the vanity trait as much with people that have OCPD. The brilliance one, I mean, I'm not saying it's not there, but I don't know if they necessarily have it to the extent that narcissists do. They might strive to continue to learn and become more knowledgeable and more intellectual. However, narcissists, again, they don't really do anything necessarily to support the idea that they're brilliant, right? I think that's another really important distinction, is that the working really, really hard tirelessly is more common with OCPD, where narcissists don't really necessarily always, I shouldn't say always, sometimes they do. They don't, it's not as earned. It's not as earned, right? They're not willing to get their hands dirty as much. They much prefer things just be handed over to them. I think both narcissists and people with OCPD can come off as being quite condescending to other people. Again, I think the motivation is different though. I think narcissists do just more to elevate themselves. People with OCPD will be condescending if someone kind of disagrees with the rule that they have or a rule that exists in society. When narcissists don't get their way, they're way more likely, in my opinion, to victimize themselves compared to people with OCPD. People with OCPD might fight back, just openly disagree with somebody, but they're not as likely to kind of victimize themselves in the way that narcissists are known to. One thing that I have noticed in clients that have had OCPD, and again, this is just in my experience, and I think it depends on a lot of factors like severity, up the spectrum being one of those big factors, is that people with OCPD can be more likely to change, meaning that they can be more likely to embrace more flexible thought patterns if there's a value to that. So for example, if they highly value their significant other, and their significant other is kind of at their endpoint with their behavior, maybe threatening divorce, and someone with OCPD really values this person, really loves them, they might be more willing to start to act more flexible and less controlling towards their spouse and see the value in kind of modifying and changing that behavior. Narcissists, I think they have a much harder time changing. I think in many cases, it's not possible for narcissists to really truly change. I read a research study recently that people that go to therapy for narcissism or have NPD take an average of 3 to 10 years of weekly psychotherapy to show some changes. So it's not very likely that a narcissist is really going to be capable of true change. Narcissists don't come to therapy very often. If they do, usually it's for something else, or they're kind of forced into it by somebody, and they don't tend to last very long. I think probably 1 out of 20 people with narcissism actually will stick it out in the long run in therapy. It's not very often. And I've seen people that have traits of OCPD or the diagnosis for long periods of time because they genuinely do notice that something in their life isn't quite right, and they want to work on that, even if they initially have a hard time seeing how they're contributing to their own problems. Again, this isn't always the case. I think a lot of it depends. It depends what traits are present. It depends on how severe and how ingrained those traits are, and also what the motivation for change is. I hope this video was enlightening. Definitely feel free that if anyone here has personal experience on, dealing with somebody that has OCPD, please share down below. I've lived with a narcissist before, so I've seen the inner workings of that. But I've never lived with someone that has OCPD. I've seen them in clinical settings, but of course that's just a snapshot. So if there's other things, if you have experience with both or just someone with OCPD, definitely leave some comments down below on what that experience was like for you. I think that this is something that definitely deserves more attention. I can definitely see how someone can get confused on whether someone might be a narcissistic or more obsessive compulsive personality. So I definitely think raising more awareness on this comparison would be beneficial. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I release weekly content, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.